Welcome to another exciting episode of Live by Heart Today. Show 59, In Search of Resurrection. With your hosts, Dawn and Wendy. Our show begins now. Streaming from Retro Earth Studio and brought to you by
Learn to play jazz piano like a pro, by a pro, with Jazz Piano Pro Essentials at jazzpianopro.com.
And wearehistorically.com. Conscious brand apparel. It's time for the next episode of Live by Heart
Today.
Hello and welcome to the Live by Heart Today, show number 59. This is a show designed to help you navigate change, uncertainty, and the new world we found ourselves in. We'll talk a little bit about science, a little bit about how our body works, a little bit about intuition, and we'll talk a lot about transformation. I'm Dawn Spiegelberg, medical, intuitive, and coherence coach. We're focusing on rebirth. Today's theme is In Search of Resurrection. With me for today's Heart to Heart is my co-host, Wendy R. Wolf, professional transformation facilitator. Welcome, Wendy.
You know, my authentic response is, the crowd goes wild. Finally, the resurrection. Woo!
Finally.
Celebrate, celebrate, celebrate. Let's utilize that energy. We've been talking about rebirth for weeks and weeks now, but now we're going to really hit resurrection and energy and how we can say hello to it. So, hello. You know, before we go real into it, I was looking up one of the illustrations of this is the phoenix rising from the ashes. We've talked about other illustrations, but I thought I'd just read real quick because not everybody in our culture is attuned to this image. So in Wikipedia, it says the phoenix is a long-lived bird associated with Greek mythology and many other cultures that cyclically regenerates or is otherwise born again. Associated with the sun, phoenix obtains new life by rising from the ashes of its predecessor. Some legends say it dies in a show of flames and combustion. Others that it simply dies and decomposes before being born again. So it's a wonderful, one of the many images, and we will talk about butterflies, and we also talk about the egg and stuff. But this phoenix rising is so beautiful and archetypally simple. So I thought maybe we could start there.
Yeah, that's a beautiful place to start. And I'd just like to mention that we all know that the phoenix rises from the ashes, and we pay attention to the phoenix. But ash is really dirty. It's a mess.
It's a mess.
And nobody talks about the mess. Nobody talks about the soot and the blackness that doesn't come off when you wash. And from that pile of what do you do with it? You know, we throw it away. We throw it over the back hill. We get rid of it. And it's that very thing that the phoenix arises out of.
Yeah.
So we focus on the phoenix without always recognizing that it just came out of a mess of a mess.
Yes. Yes. Beautiful. And in this series, in this spring themed series, we have been saying hello a lot to the process of death and letting go and failure. We'll say more about that sometime, and our willingness to take up our cross, our willingness to let go, and what it takes. Then now we're going to talk about what it takes to come back into life.
Yes.
All messy, just like being born, messy, messy, messy.
And the seed gets stuck in the dirt, in dirt that's full of worms and bugs and microbes. It's messy.
It is. It is. And you know, you've been there with your actual body and consciousness. You want to talk about birth a little bit and what that's like. I mean, this is what we're talking about. Rebirth,
Mm,
birth.
mm. Um, uh, birth is birth for me really was a miracle, and many people talk about it being a miracle. And when you experience it, when you're in the midst of it, I really feel for myself that there is a sacred energy, there is a holiness around it. And before the birth, there is a lot of preparation that happens. There's the 40 weeks of gestation. There are uh, a lot of uncomfortable things that happen too. There's a point at which a baby inside your body has grown so much that you can't eat very much anymore because there's no room for food. You have trouble breathing, and breathing is essential because there isn't enough space for you and and a baby inside you. The the process of giving birth in in the circles that I was in, I went to birth classes, and we took classes from a very well-known woman who wrote a book about birthing, and it's the complete guide to birthing. So everything is in there. And what was amazing about learning from her is she would say things like, you want to prepare as best you can, but you're never prepared. Because if you've never had a child before, you don't know what to expect. You don't know what's going to happen. And so she would talk about all the kinds of things that could possibly happen, which when you're pregnant, some of those things you don't want to talk about. You don't want to talk about not living through your birth. There are a lot of very difficult subjects, but she gave us the tools to manage it. She always said, seek help. Here's information. Keep this card. Ask the right questions. You can make it through.
Yes.
And know that you can make it through. So nature doesn't get that coaching. People need that coaching.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to me that she asked a question in one of our birthing classes, how many people have held a child before? Very few. How many people had held a newborn before? Very few. So these were people who were going to soon have a newborn in their house, and they had no experience.
Wow. It's very, as a person who I haven't had my own babies, it's very important to desensitize, to acclimatize to holding a baby, holding a very, very small baby, all these things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not alone letting it come out of your body.
Yeah, and that's another important thing to understand, and that follows what we've been talking about. So you can prepare, and there is a period of time while giving birth that the best thing for you to do is relax and let it just happen. And we talked about taking up our cross and never actually getting on it.
Mm-hmm.
And we can just get up on the cross and then release all the expectations, release the stress. And when that happens, the outcome is better. There's less discomfort. There's more progress, right? If we're holding, that baby's not coming. But if you release, if you let go, and they have a description that discomfort or pain can cause fear and contribute to fear. And where there's fear, there's tension.
Yes.
And if you're tense, that increases your experience of what's uncomfortable.
Yes.
Which increases your fear of the unknown, which contributes, right? And it's this cycle that keeps going. So because women in our society often don't see birth before they give birth,
Yes.
They're not exposed to other women going through it. So they don't see with mirror neurons how to relax. They don't see how it can happen naturally. How many people have been told by their doctors that their baby's too big to be born by them, so they have to get a cesarean? Why would God make children too big to be born? Right? Something's strange about that statement, but often that's what I've heard. And there's convenience for the doctor. There, you can schedule it, then you can just go in and have it done. But there's so many things missing when it's a little more artificial that way. There are specific hormones that are created that bond you to your baby strongly, that allow you to tap into knowing. So this idea of resurrection and letting go and preparing up to the as much as you can, but then realizing you can't prepare everything and relaxing into the process creates better outcomes.
Yes. Yes. And then the body itself has a process.
Yes.
That brings you and the child through the process.
Yes.
Uncomfortable for both, it would seem, but it gets the job done.
So we should talk about that discomfort, because there is, if we talk about caterpillars, there are things caterpillars do. They eat until they get to a certain size, and then they spin a cocoon or they create a chrysalis. So there's work involved, and then they rest. And then once the transformation takes place, they don't stay in the cocoon. They don't stay in the chrysalis. Then they break free.
Yes.
And the process of breaking free is a bit of a struggle. And during that struggle, which is also true in birth, during that time of being born, things are changing. The blood in a baby and then in the uterus, right, it's shifting. So the uterine blood goes into the baby, and that's important. The baby's own blood from the placenta, it's important for the baby to have that. And in some babies, they don't get it. A lot of the blood stays in the placenta, on the placental side. And so they can be born anemic or with low blood count, right? It sets off its own problems. So the birth process is designed to be beneficial and give back to both the baby and the mother what's essential, what they need.
Yeah.
So if you cut the umbilical cord immediately, right, then the blood doesn't have a chance to necessarily flow. Babies that aren't born naturally, sometimes their heart doesn't have that final stage of transformation where blood now comes from the lungs instead of via the other pathways, because they don't use their lungs until they're born. So there are a lot of seemingly complex things that happen in a birth that are good, even though it's wildly uncomfortable, and it's a process. It's a process.
Yes, and the a lot of the essential, what I'm hearing is a lot of the essentials of that process kind of are beyond our conscious control. It's just the flow, the things that happen that care for the mom and the child in this transition for the child to be born and to be born well. And the same thing we've talked about with the chickens pecking themselves out of the egg and how that develops them, and how the butterfly getting out of the cocoon helps them. So the whole process is, for the butterfly, for example, like the butterfly does and does and does and gets in the cocoon and then rests, and then nature takes its course, and then the butterfly gets out.
Yes.
Like between, magic happens.
Yeah.
There's a black box here. This goes to that, and then action can happen again. So I think it's very beautiful to just to talk about this in our soul development process, how it's so similar. Like, we can only do so much. We can take up our cross, as we've talked about, and be willing to get on it. And then, unto you I commit my spirit, and then let go. And then the magic of the death and resurrection can happen. And then, can we act from there? Can we allow the stone to fall away and come into a new world?
Mm-hmm.
That wonderful action that's needed to come to be born, come from birth to life.
Mm-hmm.
So all these illustrations, I think, are very helpful.
Yeah, I recall being pregnant and toward the end of my pregnancy, and so many people saying, "Oh, are you ready to be over?" Because they've heard women say, "I'm ready for this baby to be born." And I got to thinking about that, and I realized this baby in my body gets fed on its own when it needs to.
Yeah.
I don't have to wash it, change diapers. I don't. I'm fine with this baby in my belly for as long as it wants to stay, because when it's born, it's a whole new world out there.
Yes. It's uncomfortable in my body. It's hard to breathe. I have to pee all the time. It's hard to eat, all these things, but it's going to be a very interesting challenge afterward.
Yes, yes. And so I embraced all of that. I said, okay, I'm only eating this much. Okay. Oh, and, I have to tell you this funny thing, having to pee all the time. A part of that is because there's so much pressure, right, that your bladder doesn't fill up very much.
Yeah.
Or if it does, it's hard to release all of it. So my friends and I came up with this brilliant idea, and I shared it with all my friends who were pregnant at the time, that if you hold your belly up, it allows you to drain it.
Nice. Good. Thanks for passing that on.
Right? No, nobody talks about that. And I'd never heard that before. And in fact, I should probably put it somewhere so that women know that's a possibility. You don't have to, pee just a little bit every half hour. You could actually empty your bladder and help yourself doing that.
That's good news.
Yeah. Lots of best practices that I think they may be lost now because I'm not pregnant again. So
you have a lot of good stuff about it. Maybe in your, as part of your stuff, you could have a little section.
Maybe.
For
I don't know. I'd have to spend time going back to those days, right? I'd have to remember. And we did a lot of things that most people don't do. Like, we didn't buy a lot of baby furniture. Our baby came home to live with us the way we were living. So
nice.
We didn't change that much. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So your experience, and then your babies, most babies don't remember enough to tell us.
Yeah.
We don't usually remember, but it must be an incredible process for the baby to go through that, and then the awakening into a whole new world. I can only imagine, and it blows my mind.
Yeah, the concept of resurrection, I think a lot of people, there was a period of time where they didn't think children would remember, or I guess they just disregarded them as people because they were small. That seems strange to me, but imagining that you were always the right temperature, you never visually saw anything, what you heard was mostly loud gut noises and a loud heartbeat, this chamber, I'll say it was like an isolation chamber, I guess.
Yeah.
And then hearing muffled voices from your parents, right? Because you weren't hearing clearly. And then to be born and you're wet, so the temperature in that room is cold.
Yeah.
Surprise. And now suddenly you're opening your eyes and there's something you've never seen before hitting your retina. So that's a whole brain shift. And then your ears hearing that's stimulating for your brain.
Yes.
And so when my first was born, they had to clean it. They had to bulb sponge his nose to make sure everything was clean. And my husband and I had agreed that we wouldn't do that as just to do it, because right there's a little tender nose that had never been touched before, and some guy shoving this end in it, right, and sucking, and we were just like, no, we don't want our baby to experience that. But our first one needed to. And it's interesting because right at the moment they were going to do it, my husband stood up and said, "Don't do that." And it was beautiful to see him remember, right, that we had decided, we wanted our baby to have as easy a transition as was possible.
Right.
And they took him over to a table, and then they were shining this bright light on him, right, you've never seen before, and now you're being blinded. My husband was so sweet and covered his eyes.
Oh, so sweet.
Right.
Oh.
So that moment of birth, when you've accomplished, when your body pushed out a child, and then we learned the sex of our baby at that moment, so that was joy. And then to see this being that was a totally, completely different person, that was a resurrection. That truly was a moment of just incredible joy and beginning. Joy and beginning. And it was new. It was absolutely new.
Mm-hmm. And it really did start a completely different life.
Yes.
For you and your husband.
Yes.
And family. Really different, especially the first baby, but both really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a few things we touched on, but I hadn't identified. We talked a little bit about our ego, our mind tricking us into not releasing, not letting go. And that's the cycle I mentioned, the discomfort, the fear, and then the tension.
Yes.
And that cycle in our brain makes it difficult to release, makes it difficult to transition.
Yes. And I just want to say, as a body worker, like we know that if we can interrupt that cycle, things can resolve and get easier, as opposed to keep getting worse.
Yes.
Interrupt that tension, interrupt that fear, interrupt that pain a little bit. It can go in the other direction, which is really nice. Yeah.
One thing they mention in birthing classes is they call it a pain with a purpose. And I will say I prefer to call it discomfort, because not every woman experiences birth the same way. Not every woman is in pain, and all the movies show women screaming and cursing, and that's not true of every woman. My sister's a great example, where I don't think it was that uncomfortable for her to give birth. And there is some discomfort, and I'll say for myself, there was some discomfort, but it was not unbearable. It was not unbearable. I remember 2 contractions where my mind said, "What the hell did I get myself into?
Yeah.
Why did I allow this to happen?" Right? Only 2 out of, hours of
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good news. Thank you.
And for somebody who's thinking those thoughts with every contraction, that prolongs the process.
Yes.
It makes it more stressful. And then the more stressed you are, the more stressed the baby is. And that's what escalates into them needing to, I don't want to say interfere, that's not the word, but
take other measures.
Yes. Yeah. So, maybe we need to monitor your baby, or maybe we need to pull your baby out, right? All the things, interventions, all the interventions that they do that are supposed to be helpful. And in some cases they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Was there anything else? I interrupted you when you were saying the cycle. Was there anything else you wanted to review from what we just talked about?
Well, before we take a break, I just want to say that once you're resurrected, once you've gone through the birth, once you're on the other side, the work is not over.
The work is not over.
The
That's
work is
really
not
what our
over.
focus is today.
Yes, yes. So let's talk about that when we come back from the break.
Wonderful.
Let's give a shout out to our sponsors. Thank you, We Are Historically, for making this show possible. Shop online at wearehistorically.com.
Hello, my name is Wendy R. Wolf, and I hope you come to my intensive. I'm really interested in working together with people who are big feelers, healers, also lovers, and leaders. These are the people that tend to be really paying attention to what's going on the inside and how we can help people from there, help other people. And I'm going to offer an intensive with interactive exercises so that we can become empowered as big feelers and healers and lovers and leaders. And I hope you join me. Please go to my website, wendyrwolf.com, and on the top I'll have a button to sign up. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dawn Spiegelberg, a heart coherence coach. How do you feel supported in your life when the rest of the world is anything but supportive to you? It comes from inside. It comes from the foundations that you create day in and day out. The most important thing in understanding how to maintain happiness is the time, because it's the time that you put into maintaining your individual happiness that doesn't just happen overnight. It takes an investment. Live an amazing life and let me help you live that way. Right? Book a session.
Hi, I'm Darius Wilrich. I instruct an online video course that teaches anyone how to play jazz piano like a pro with my proven step-by-step system that makes it simple to learn. Jazz Piano Pro Essentials. Learn the quickest way to start memorizing and playing scales today. Download my free Quick Start Guide.
Welcome back to the Live by Heart Today show. We are discussing In Search of Resurrection, and in our prior shows, we had mentioned the process and the process of dying, and death is the way to move forward. Taking up the journey of dying, and now we've shifted into completing that death and what happens on the other side of death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just like the way in is a taking up our cross, or taking up our willingness to let go. On the other side, after the magic happens, after that darkness of transformation, then it's another taking up. And I experienced from myself, in the soul process, the reason I talk about this and I'm so excited about it and vociferous, passionate, is because it really takes something to come up from the darkness.
Mm.
And it's not like we have to strive. That's our human, like, I have to strive. But it is, it helps to press the elevator button to come up out of the darkness. It helps to allow myself to go into the, I'm mixing metaphors, to go into the telephone booth and put on my, which one is that? Superman suit.
Yeah.
To be able to fly upward.
Yeah.
There is choice, and there is a willingness to ride that energy of the male element up into the next phase of our soul journey. Mm-hmm. And that isn't something that all, especially women or people with a lot of female energy, are aware of. Like, we just hear about the let go, let go, let go.
Yes.
And that gets us just so far, but then there's the rise, and that's important too.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you notice about that?
Yeah, the phoenix does fly.
Yeah.
It arises from the ashes and it flies. The butterfly eats through the cocoon, and the nature of it moving and struggling and trying to squeeze out and chewing pushes fluid throughout its body that it has never used yet,
Yeah.
to enable it to fly. And once it flies, it is immediately in search of food, as you would imagine. So that's also true of infants. They have an innate ability to, latch on and suckle. And nobody has to teach them that. And that's the next action. They're born, and then they're in search of. My first child lifted his head. They put him on my belly. He lifted his head and crawled himself up to nurse.
Nice.
And it
That's
was
what it
amazing.
takes.
Yeah,
Yes.
nobody taught him, but that was the action.
Yes.
He was born, and then he was taking action immediately.
Yes, that's exactly it. And it is, I believe, the natural way, but some of us are encouraged out of it, or we've let that muscle not develop in our previous life, for some of us in our soul. And like, so I believe it's very helpful to be saying to the world, like, it takes this and that.
Mm-hmm.
And please don't let anyone say it's only this. It's only letting go all the time, because we need two wings of the bird to fly.
Mm-hmm.
We need the male and the female action. And then both are beautiful.
Yes, both are beautiful, both are necessary, and it may be our tendency for some people to spend time just thinking about the death. Oh my God, I just died. Oh, that was horrible. And not take those first steps and move on, move past it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the benefit of living in the now moment. We've gone through the night of the dark soul. We've gone through our death. We're now resurrected. And what's important now in this moment?
Yes.
It's to step out of the mess. It's to rise from the ashes. We don't stand around looking at the ashes and say, wow, this was really horrible. we move away from it. Mm-hmm. And
yes,
we let other people clean it up. That's the beautiful thing about giving birth in a hospital or a birth center. There's someone else cleaning up.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It really is. And then you get to focus on your baby. You get to focus on the next important basics of taking action and moving beyond that. And if we're spending time thinking about the death, focusing on the death, you're still in it. You haven't made it all the way through yet.
Yes, because there's a new world here now after. Like, just like, it's not the same phoenix, it's a new phoenix. And what really illustrates it well for me is in Lord of the Rings, how Tolkien, he shows Gandalf as unrecognizable. He went from Gandalf the Gray to Gandalf the White. He was different.
Yes.
And the caterpillar is no more. Now it's a butterfly. And we're the same people, but we're not. We're new. And Jesus said, unless you're born again, you will not experience the reign of God. Like, it's a new world. We can see more clearly. The scales fall away from our eyes, so we have eyes to see and ears to hear that we didn't have before, open to what's going on. So the world is experienced differently by us, and it's just important to recognize that.
That's true.
And to allow it, and allow like my brain, my intellect, my belief system continues to have to turn because it's different,
Mm-hmm.
and to allow that others will perceive us differently.
Mm-hmm.
Some won't recognize us. Like it's over and over with the Jesus story, that they didn't recognize him until X happened or Y, or noticing certain things. They didn't, his very closest people didn't recognize him until they did.
Mm-hmm.
And so like a real change has happened, and can we own that? And I believe that's what we're talking about in our next show, is to talk
Mm-hmm.
about like starting to allow, acclimate, iterate into a different reality in which we're new and the world experiences us differently and we experience the world differently.
That is a remarkable description. The newness is what the New Testament talks about. Christ said, being born of the water and having a new mind, a new body. And I will say, from my experience of giving birth, I was a transformed person.
Yes.
And I can honestly say that didn't happen with all my friends giving birth. And we all gave birth in different ways,
Mm-hmm.
in different places. And the ones who had I'll just say, a more natural childbirth, they were changed. And the women who didn't have as natural a childbirth did not change. And as a matter of fact, when they were home with their babies after a few months, they were asking the question, is this it? They weren't different.
Hmm.
And it was not satisfying to them.
It's interesting. It reminds me of, I just have to say, whatever people choose to do is fine, right?
Yes, yes.
But it does remind me of, there's many cultures, more earth-centric cultures, less technological cultures, that have processes to help, particularly help men to go from being children to adults, to being boys to men.
Rites of passage.
Rites of passage. Whereas generally, it's my understanding that a lot of the women, the rites of passage is giving birth.
Mm.
Like we naturally, in the old days, most of us naturally went through this process in which we both the gestation and the birthing, and then of course having children, was such a transformative experience that it doesn't have to happen like through ritual. And it's really cool to hear you say that, because you had to be new. You had to be someone you didn't know yourself to be to get through that. And it also made you someone new.
Yeah.
Kind of wild.
I think it's also true of the intimacy. The first time a woman is intimate with a partner, there's a transformation that happens there. The sexuality, that's a rite of passage for women, and perhaps men too. And then giving birth for women is another rite of passage. And yeah, those are woven into the fabric of a more traditional culture, a more traditional social framework.
Is it okay to delve in there a little, or you want to leave it at that?
Yeah, let's delve in there a little bit. We've got 2 minutes.
Okay. So you say particularly for women, is it the vaginal intercourse? Is it the actual, what is your perception about that?
That there's a physiological change that occurs, and that creates a change in who you are and how you identify. It's also true of going through menses.
Yeah.
Before menses, you knew you were a girl, but the rite of passage of having a period is different, right?
Yes.
Now you are of childbearing age, and that is described as being a woman even if you're 9, 10, or 11 years old, right? There has been a change.
Yes.
And that's a rite of passage, right? There's all the change hormonally, all the change in the actions that you take and the ways in which you care for your body, that all changes. And then the intimacy I described, that's another shift that happens with women. And then, of course, birth itself is yet again the shift. And then one of the final shifts, I won't say it's the last one, but one of the final shifts of menopause is yet another rite of passage. It's another type of death and resurrection, because who are we as women if we're not childbearing? What's our contribution, right?
Mm-hmm.
And our body has been so central to who we are and how we are being. And when that function is no longer active or accessible, right? Now what?
Yeah. So both theoretically and physiologically and emotionally, that the two sides of the bookends of this, the beginning of menses and then menopause, are very, very strong, obvious, overt. Like I'm with you on that. Like very overt transitions, tremendous transitions that like, I know our society talks about it a lot, but I really don't feel like it's honored as much as it's how important it is.
I think it's not honored energetically or spiritually. They talk about it physically, and there's lots of products and painkillers, and doctors. Now there's commercials where women are talking about feminine products, which is interesting to me. But they don't talk about it in the more psychological, the more personal, the more spiritual changes that happen. And so I don't think it's honored as much as it could be.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that in my soul, in my emotions, in my body, both of those transitions were very large. And I think maybe we'll talk about it more sometime.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
I hope so.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you, Wendy. And thanks to everyone who's watching today. We'd love to hear from you. If our conversation spoke to you, please tell us what's on your heart by leaving us a comment. For more information about how you can live by heart, please go to livebyhearttoday.com. Like and follow this page and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our programs. We're here every week on Thursdays at 4:44 Pacific time. From our heart to yours, we are creating a better tomorrow because we live by heart today.
And that concludes this portion of
Live by Heart Today!
Thank you for watching. View more episodes on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you, We Are Storically, for your conscious human apparel. Shop online at wearestorically.com.
Hi, I'm Darius Wilrich. I'll teach you everything you need to know about playing jazz piano like a pro with my 12-week online video course and downloadable guidebook, Jazz Piano Pro Essentials. Enroll today at jazzpianopro.com.
Thank you for joining us. Have a happy old way.